Hello there, my name is Japheth Mast, and welcome to the Make Life Awesome podcast. I'm the Ex-Amish photographer with the funny name and the crazy hair, but trust me, there's a whole lot more to me than just that. In this podcast, I really hope to show you my heart more than what's in my head, because that's where all the really beautiful stuff is. I'm so glad you're here. Let's jump in to learning together what it looks like to make life awesome. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Make Life Awesome podcast. I'm super excited for the episode that you're about to hear. It is with my grandpa Robert. He's on my dad's side. It's just an incredible interview, giving you a lot of insight into the Amish, because he grew up very conservative, old order, Orthodox Amish. And we go into stories from his childhood, what that was like, experiences with the Amish church, and the shunning that the Amish do, and just really rich and fun interview. I believe you'll get a lot out of it and gain a new perspective on the Amish lifestyle. And it also gives you kind of a look into where I've come from, just a background and kind of how far that I've been able to go from my grandpa's day to now, and just the freedom journey there is just really incredible. Without further ado, enjoy this interview with my grandpa. Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. I am here with my grandpa Robert Mast. You want to say hi?
Hi.
So you came down here to Reading over the weekend, so I thought it'd be a good time to grab you and do a podcast with you. So excited to see what the wisdom that you have. And so you're on my dad's side, my dad's dad. Maybe can you just start off just telling us a little bit about where you are in life right now? How old are you roughly? How many kids, maybe grandkids, and where you're living? Does that sound good?
Okay. My given name is Robert Mast. I'm 72 years old. Mm-hmm. I live in Northwest Montana at this point in time. We are close to a geographical change of address. We're planning to move probably next year north of Boise, Idaho. The prime mover of this decision is simply that all of our children have left the area now. You know, God has moved them through whatever circumstance to different areas. Yeah, we have 11 children. The 2 oldest are in heaven. So the 9 living are scattered around. They're in age of about 29 to, I believe, 47, thereabouts. There are 28 grandchildren.
28. So let's go back. Because you have such an amazing story, and I want to let people hear that a little bit. So maybe go back to your younger years. You know, where were you? What was life like? Yeah, maybe start there, and kind of like, where did you come from, basically?
I was born in 1947, 35 miles east of Cleveland, Ohio, in a very Orthodox Amish community. Basically, a small Amish farming community. When I say very Orthodox, our lives were ruled by the rules of the Amish church. Their view of life, how it should be, the mandatory rule of life, which involved every aspect of our lives. The clothing we wore, to every other practice in life. We spent, meaning my wife and I, we spent the first 29 years of our life in that environment. We left that in 1977, just short of my 30th birthday. At that time, we had 7 children. Yes.
So you got married really young, had a lot of kids, and you're living in Ohio. Can you kind of go into a little bit more detail of what life was like, maybe as a teenager? Like what did that look like? what was life like on the farm, chores and family life? What was that like?
Well, probably one of the first things I need to say was that basically I was born number 5, and I was the 5th child, and I was only 6 weeks old when my mother died. So I do not have a recollection of my biological mother. She died as you might say, an indirect result of childbirth, where she had a blood clot in her leg. And, of course, in 1947, we didn't have the medical technology. The country doctor did treat her. I don't know what he did, but 6 weeks after my birth, this clot traveled to her brain, and overnight she died. And what I've gathered, this was, of course, very traumatic for a family of 5, again, all being very young. And Dad and Mom being on just a small dairy farm were eking out a living. And all of a sudden, Mom was gone. Dad he hired younger ladies to come help with the household. There were different change-outs. But approximately close to a year and a half later, he remarried. So the first recollection was of actually a stepmother, a good stepmother that did very well in a challenging situation to take care of 5 young rowdies, probably. And so we were farming, like really small-scale farming, milking about a dozen cows by hand, shipping that milk off to the processing plant. That was our primary source of income. Dad did work as the boys became older. He did part-time work to help support the family. Our extracurricular activities were just neighborhood friends, kind of primitive, you might say, activities.
Did you play any sports?
Yes, baseball predominated. There were neighborhood baseball games. There were like small sandlot games right at home in our yard, basically in our yard. Other games were enjoyed by family. There was a lot of playtime together, evenings and Sundays. But the 6 work days were really dominated by work, but not slavery type work, just good, healthy work. Working the fields with horse-drawn machinery, milking the cows by hand.
Yeah, and the Amish, they have an amazing work ethic. Can you just go into like an average weekday, an average work day? What did your day work like? What did your day look like? Maybe, I know you had to get up early to milk the cows and all of that. What was that like?
Yes, well, it depends on the season of the year. As springtime came, late winter came, we were fortunate, and I consider this a very cherished memory. Part of our little farm had maybe 10 or 15 acres, predominantly sugar maple trees. So typically late February found us tapping these trees, gathering the sap, and then hauling them to the central sugar house station, where it would be emptied into a larger tank and flowing into the evaporating pans, which were fueled by just simply wood-fired arches, we call them, a wood-fired fireplace underneath the pans. There's an awesome process of evaporating this, basically 35 to 40 gallons of sap would need to be evaporated to extract 1 gallon of pure maple syrup. Mm-hmm. And so prior to that, of course, there was a lot of firewood being cut and gathered to handle that season. And from there, this intermingled with the fields. The snow was melting. The fields were opening up where where we would spend the rest of our daylight hours, basically, starting to plow the fields to do the crops. So the springtime was a crop planting time, and then it evolved into the haying, the rest of the cropping season. Those days were filled with basically 5 o'clock in the morning in the barn, taking care of the animals, milking, feeding, as well the horses, and then graduating to breakfast and a full day of field work, etc. And the many, many duties that came along with that, whether it was fixing machinery, just umpteens of animal husbandry duties along with agricultural practices. Your evening times finally evolved to where you probably had some free time. For us, it was games, sports, fun time, and that was the day. That was a typical day with all the variety of work, basically work. This was a healthy work. This is what promoted basically the work ethic that we as a group, we as an Amish heritage and religion employed. And basically that has stayed a cornerstone of who we are.
Yeah. Wow. That was good. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I'm really so thankful to be a part of this heritage with the good work ethic and the value for that. It's been amazing. I'm really thankful for that. So you had a pretty full, busy childhood, your growing up years, a lot of hard work. What about like school? Did you do 8th grade? What was that like? Because the Amish, they almost never do high school.
Yes, so true. In my day, I went to a very rural public school. There was 8 elementary grades, 1 through 8, 1 classroom of each. For those who wanted to continue high school, they were transported just a little further out, where there was a consolidated high school. But for the Amish, they didn't believe that high school was necessary. They were going to be farmers or carpenters, etc., basic skill sets that they achieved just doing life. So I treasured those days because I got to mix actually with others a little more that were not Amish. And it was just real life. We thoroughly learned the basics, what they call the ABCs. It was a good time. There was discipline in the school, but very good times where we really made relationships with each other, our fellow students.
One of the other kind of cornerstones of the Amish is their kind of community lifestyle, where it's generally, and feel free to talk into this, but it's, a dozen or 2 dozen or a couple of dozen families just living in a very close-knit community, and they do life together, they help out, they do a lot of stuff together, and they, pitch in when someone needs help or is hurting, and they're just, and it's really cool. Do you have anything to say there? It's so different in today's culture, where it's a lot of isolation and just looking after number one. What are your thoughts there?
Yes, I am also happy to exaggerate on that a bit. Very true. Certain aspects, even of harvesting, we would help each other. Maybe 5 or 6 or 8 neighbors would together to harvest the grain from the field. And this is very bonding when you work together, where the farm dads and their elder sons perhaps would help each other with the harvest. And there was never an unmet need amongst our people. Whatever need that a family needed, whether it was just support, if there was sickness, meaning that could be financial or physical, they were always there for each other. This built a very strong community that I still believe is a cornerstone of America. We never should want to lose that. There's something about city life, but rural America is it's a very strength of our country. And we were able to exemplify that in my lifetime growing up. So after the 8th grade, as a 13 or 14-year-old, typically we were at home helping and becoming full-time farm help to help our dads with the harvest, with everything that went on, and being available to help in the community, whether it was rebuilding a barn that got lost through fire or storm, or a house. And that is one aspect that is still very much so in our Amish communities, period. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really good. That community lifestyle is definitely something that I miss. It's a beautiful thing that the Amish have. And so you got married really young, started having kids. And at what point did you kind of leave your roots or leave that part of your story? What was the tipping point, or kind of what led you? Because I know you moved to Pennsylvania and then to Montana. What was that journey like?
In those early years, what really started us thinking in a different channel was there were some practices we had questions to God, even though we hardly knew how to think, how to pray. I am so in awe of a God that was trying to reach our hearts. And there were certain practices also amongst our young people that we were to some extent a part of before marriage that were questionable, that didn't really, we felt, well, this doesn't align with God's way. So as we questioned that, we also started looking out, and we wanted more. The best way I know to phrase it now is just simply, we wanted more. And in our own ways, we were questioning that. And seeing that there is some pioneering going on amongst Amish. They're moving out of the larger community, and some of them are having more enlightening spiritually. So this was an evolution already going on for several years, and we found this community only 70 miles from our home. They were still tied fairly closely to the spiritual center, but yet their thinking was more progressive, and their spiritual understanding was definitely more enlightened. So after visiting several times and communicating with several of those, we took a rather giant step. In 1977, we moved to this new community in western Pennsylvania, and it started opening up a wider horizons. Like I've stated, more progressive in practice, but understanding the Bible. And as we spent 17 years, we started embracing some rather radical changes, especially spiritually and personally for me and my wife, and starting to understand a greater responsibility to our children. For instance, a stark instance was where we were just taught to always read this German Bible, not always understanding everything we read, and praying out of a German Amish prayer book. And so now there came a point where I just had to satisfy myself, and I bought an English Bible study, a study Bible, and I started digging in more to these spiritual truths. And I knew God was telling me, I want your heart. I don't want the religious practices. More so, I want your heart. So I started praying with my family, leading out and praying with my family, just out of my heart, instead of reading this prayer book. This was major in opening my eyes, our eyes, to the greatness of God. So this was kind of an ongoing, I use the term, the spiritual evolution of my own life was just a gradual turning and seeing and understanding that God wanted us to experience that relationship with Him, not just a church that demanded, yes, that it was mandatory, that every rule had to be followed, or there were consequences of disciplining from the Amish church hierarchy. So this was very revolutionary, and it carried over to a dissatisfaction even in this area. We were now going beyond the norm of even this new area that we were living in, where there was some progression, but still tied quite tightly to the Amish system of being ruled by the hierarchy, by peer pressures, etc. It led to another major move where we moved to the northwest corner of Montana. What was amazing in this was 2 years prior to us moving there as a family, our oldest son, the second oldest in the family, he was experiencing, I felt it, I heard it, he was experiencing also the more. There's more to this. There was a certain dissatisfaction was playing out in his life with just the Amish controlling our lives, putting us all in a box to be the same. And he made a connection with this far out northwest Montana, tiny little community, this certain family. And at one point he asked me, "Dad, could I just go out and spend a summer there? They build log homes. I'd like to experience that. I could have a job there, I think." And I didn't fully understand it at the time, but my spirit gave assent. And I traveled with my older son to this community and to install him. I spent one short weekend there and installed him, and he became a part of their they were building log homes. He became a part of their force, a vital part of their force quite rapidly. And then that same year, they moved into this newer area where they expanded the pioneering, the spiritual pioneering that they were into, which led to us moving there approximate 2 years later.
Wow, there's some rich history there. You had quite a journey. So, yeah, you started off in this really Orthodox Amish system, and then had that dissatisfaction with what you saw, and decided to just run after it, and be led by your hunger, and then you just kept chasing it until you found at least part of the more that you were seeking after, and that's really cool. And so you were talking about the rule-based system and the kind of atmosphere of control, and just so strict and so based on traditions, and there's just not really any freedom in that. Is there anything else you want to expound on with that? Any specific examples there?
Yes, to give an example, in this new community that we had moved to, even though we ourselves were still dim with understanding the freedoms, the grace dispensation that God wants us to live in for Him. Here's an example. We thought there was more freedom, but the time came when a young single man, a single gentleman, had more understanding of that very freedom. And when he didn't come, he came to our Sunday morning church service not wearing the very customary traditional Amish hat. The first Sunday, probably, he was met with sharp looks, like, what's going on? As this continued, the time came soon when he was approached by the ministry and like, what's going on? And his explanations did not suffice, and he did not yield to doing this traditional practice. He didn't feel a need to it. It ultimately became a process of him not succumbing to the warnings and being banned and shunned. So this is something the old order Orthodox Amish Church still does practice that today in areas.
What does being banned and shunned look like?
It starts out, the process is this. The ministry will approach him and ask him, and they mean it to do it in love. They'll ask him to please obey the church rule, the standard, the tradition. And if not, they will warn the church that they have a disobedient, erring member. And then finally the process comes where they, by vote and vote of the church, they will remove him. He is now no longer able to be a communing, voting member. He is now an outcast. And they hold that would, done in love, they feel that will woo him back to become a full member again. And by the way, when they vote, the presiding official will take a vote of the church, but you must vote with the ministry or you yourself will be subject to penalty.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So in this case, this young man was removed. Period.
No. Wow. That's crazy. It's even hard to understand. Comprehend. It's so radical. Yeah.
But this is normal to them. See, let me tell you, we were subject to several examples of that. If somebody tried to quote that this is not right according to Bible, they would start to work on him. There was such an unction to keep their religious system intact. So now you get kind of a picture, maybe I'm clumsy at it, but now you get kind of a picture of the peer pressure. Period. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna work towards wrapping it up, but I got a couple more questions here. So now you're in your 70s. You have a family and grandkids and a lot of people that look up to you and love you and by a lot of accounts you've lived a well-lived life. If say you were to meet yourself face to face when you're about 20, 25, is there anything you'd say to yourself back then? Any like advice you'd give to your 20-year-old self? Anything you would say? Anything you wish you would have known back then?
That is a kind of a loaded question, but it's. I would say both yes and no. Yes to. If I'd only known, I could have moved faster into more true relationship with God. But then the no is simply that there's so much ignorance prevailed in our youth that I'm just overwhelmed with gratitude to God that somehow tries to reach into our heart and offer himself. So I responded the best I knew how. I didn't know how.
So how many years have you been married?
51.
51 years. Wow. Yeah. That's amazing. That's obviously a long time. What's been the key or a key for you just staying married that long? Because divorce is so rampant, and just have a marriage that's long is amazing. Do you have anything you'd say there? Like, what are a key or a couple keys or any advice to young married couples or people wanting to go that route?
Well, here again, it was just a given in our Orthodox circles at the time that we married that this was a very, very serious, solemn covenant. And we both wanted to respect that. We sense there are many Amish marriages that are just held together by that. But in all seriousness, we have, I emphasize once more, to us it was serious. And so we've worked through and always wanted to have that right relationship with one another. That love for each other would be the key. And I believe it has been.
That's good. Thanks for sharing. Well, I'm going to wrap it up now. But are there any parting thoughts, parting words you want to leave with the listeners?
Yes, I would just say, in whatever, God's way is to shed religion off. It's that relationship with God. And then you can relate and do better life, wherever God would lead you. Shed religion and be in true relation with God. Ever look to God for more with a thankful heart.
Oh, it's good. Oh, all right. Well, thanks for being on. Yeah. If you enjoyed this message, this podcast, feel free to reach out. Send me a message if you want to say something to Grandpa, and I'll relay it to him. But yeah, talk to you guys next time. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to the podcast today. I would love if you would leave me a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcasting platform, as it really does help the show out. You can find me on Instagram at Japheth Mast, that's spelled JaphethMast, or my website, japhethmast.com. Have an amazing week, and don't forget, make life awesome.